Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next Renaissance AI and the expansion of human potential. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a director of high growth impact entrepreneurs and head of sponsorships at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit improving access and knowledge in entrepreneurship to advance economic progress for all. As you're going to see in the chat in just a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to help entrepreneurs fuel prosperity, no matter where their journey begins. Be sure to check out those links and resources shared in the chat. Now we're going to launch a few polls to take a step back and take a temperature gauge on how everyone is doing today. First poll, how are you feeling about your business? Are you optimistic? Let us know. We use all this information to guide the programs we provide for this global community of entrepreneurs. So, if there are any specific topics or challenges you'd like us to create resources for, feel free to share them in the chat. Looks like optimism's in the lead today. Love to hear it. Just a couple more housekeeping notes. First, if you're comfortable, let us know where you're dialing in from by dropping your location in the chat. We'd love to see where you're joining us for our time together today. Secondly, we're going to open up for a live Q&A near the end of this session, so please feel free to submit those questions for us at any time using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to get to them all. All right, let's see where people are coming from today. Tampa, Florida. Ooh, Georgia. Welcome. Quincy. All righty, love to see it. There's a lot coming through. Atlanta, New Jersey, Steamboat Springs. Great. Harrison, New Jersey. Welcome, everybody. All right, this last poll, what's keeping you up at night? We also will use this to drive the next couple months of our programming. While you're answering that last poll, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the incredible support of our corporate partners. The work that we do at the center wouldn't be possible without all the generosity and belief of our partners and funders, including NASDAQ, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, KPMG, Walmart, Asia Innovation Hub, Wilson Sonsini, the Nareed Foundation, KKR, and BPM. We're deeply grateful for their partnership and hope you'll join us in sharing that appreciation as well. All right, looking at this last poll, looks like there's a pretty good mix across the board of finance, sales, marketing, team. All righty. Well, the good news for you is that our special guest today is going to cover a lot of those bases. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guest. Zack Kass is a global AI advisor, researcher, keynote speaker, and author of the book we're going to be talking about today, The Next Renaissance, AI and the Expansion of Human Potential. Zack, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So stoked, was diving into the book, and there's a lot of really, really good things. But before I jump into all these questions, maybe I invite you, other than just my introduction of your title, to talk a little bit about your background and what led you to the writing this book.
Um, my background is I grew up in my full background, I guess, is interesting as it relates to the book. I grew up in Santa Barbara. I went to Berkeley to play volleyball, ostensibly, and then ended up studying history and computer science. Graduated, found myself looking for a job, and took the only one I could get in 2009, which was at a data labeling company called Crowdflower. And Crowdflower went on to become Figure Eight, started by the guys Lucas Bewald and Chris Van Pelt, who started Weights and Biases, and cut my teeth for 6 years of my career in data labeling, long before it was popular. And actually, I remember quite well. We sold the company in 2017. I left in 2016, a year before Scale AI started. So we were clearly too early to this market, but just barely, or way too early, I suppose. And then went to a company called Lilt, building machine translation via large language models. And at the time, these models were like 50 million parameters, 100 million parameters. They were big by any measure. And we were trying to help people build better translation services. So this was the first AI enabled services business. course, again, too early. And then went to OpenAI in January 2021, this time not too early, right on time, the same month we launched the GPT-3 API and helped build, as the 70th employee, and helped build the go-to-market team from the ground up. And left just after ChatGPT Enterprise to build my advisory business. So built a large advisory and consultancy business that we're now scaling, and have spent the better part of the last 3 years in and across the world in boardrooms and governments trying to help people make sense of this moment. And when I started writing the book 3 years ago, I was actually documenting I journaled every day at OpenAI, and I was like sort of going through all the journals, and then realized what I was really trying to do is make better sense of what I believed. And the way to do that is to write it down. It's very hard to disagree with something for a long time that you've written down, or it's very easy to figure out that you just don't agree with it at all. And in the process, compiled my thoughts. And then when I published the book, I knew why I had written it, but I didn't know for whom. And then I had my daughter. My daughter was born 5 months ago, October 25th. And it became very clear to me almost that day, but certainly in the months that followed as the book came out, that I wrote the book for parents. And I wrote the book for anyone responsible for another human who is trying to make sense of this moment and wants to both tell themselves and tell the other humans that they are responsible for, that the world is okay. And in fact, that maybe it's getting better. And so it is my defense of optimism for people who need, for people who are responsible for others and need something to believe in.
I love that. And congratulations on your daughter.
Thanks.
And yeah, I mean, I think diving into the book, you're super honest throughout it. So let's dive into some of the details. In the book, you describe AI as a catalyst for unmetered intelligence. So what does that actually look like in practice for founder building businesses today?
Well, I guess we should start by defining unmetered intelligence. So unmetered intelligence is a term that I had coined, proposed in 2021 in a paper titled by the same name, with Boris Power, the head of research engineering at OpenAI. And for backdrop, and small business owners will appreciate this especially, we were traveling around the country at the time showing people demos of GPT-3. And we would go into boardrooms and we would put this science project basically up on the screen. And it was a web app, nothing more, chat interface, very straight, very, very basic. I mean, a really simple GUI. And we would show off the product. And when we were done with the demo, and it would take me a long time, I had really sort of forgotten my sales training, I would look up and people would be sort of confused. And this happened for a while, early 2023. I mean, there were probably 10 or so of these demos, maybe more. We were so eager to show people how cool we were, and people were very unsure of what to make of it. And so finally, I realized that actually we hadn't met, and this was about the time we started using the term commercial viability or economic viability to define when a token is less expensive than the task that a human would otherwise perform. And so we figured it out, and I went into a room one day with Boris, and we did a demo, and then we stopped about 5 minutes in, closed my laptop, and Boris said, now imagine we build something way better, way faster, and way cheaper. And he went on to say, well, imagine if we built GPT-4, GPT-5. And it connected. It actually clicked for people, the idea that this would get a lot better soon. And then they could at least understand that this was the beginning of a moment. And we phrased it in a paper, Unmetered Intelligence, this idea that at some point in the future, competing on the basis of brilliance alone would be hard, if not impossible, because intelligence was going the same way that electricity and water and the internet went, which is that everyone would have access, and that being a business that had, really fast internet only mattered if you had truly, high-speed trading internet, and that being a business that had a lot of energy only mattered if you had, incredible amounts of energy, and that really all businesses would sort of run on these things. And unmetered intelligence is not proposing universal brilliance. I always say this. We're not proposing that everyone will be smart in the same way that the internet doesn't mean you do research, and in the same way that that literacy doesn't mean that you read, and in the same way that cheap gyms doesn't mean that people work out. Unmetered intelligence doesn't mean that everyone will use it. It means that everyone will have access to it. And then you start asking, okay, well, what does the future look like if intelligence is a resource? And I almost called the book Unmetered Intelligence for what it's worth. And so that is the frame by which I write the book. And now I talk to CEOs about it. What is it? What happens in the world of unmetered intelligence? How does this change businesses? And to answer your question, for small businesses, I think a lot of people sit around right now and say, well, what is my fate as these technologies get, developed at a faster rate and bigger companies have more resources. And I would argue, and I think it's topical to say this, and I think some of this is, copium or whatever the kids call it. But I really do think that small businesses are massively advantaged right now, because as the rate of the technology improve and the cost decline, small businesses have what big businesses simply will not have, which is agility and ownership, right? A real fight. There is, existential threat motivates people in sort of very unique ways. And the closer you are to a business owner, which most small businesses have people who are very close to the business owner, the harder you work. And tools and technologies, intelligence as a resource, should supercharge these businesses. And then it's simply a question of how do you build guardrails and how do you build systems that actually allow your employees to best utilize.
Yeah. And speaking of guardrails, there's a growing gap between what AI can do and what small businesses are actually implementing. So where do you see founders underestimating or misapplying AI right now?
So there are basically two failure modes for founders and AI, small businesses and AI. The first failure mode is, I think, the one that there's a confirmation bias. If you're on this call, you probably care a lot about this subject. And so you're, actively thinking about it, and maybe you don't fall into this camp, but you certainly know someone who does. I'm not technical, therefore, or I haven't done enough training, therefore. And people build this mental block that actually is really similar to the mental block people build around working out or going to the gym. Well, I don't really know how to use the weights. I don't know what to do. And it turns out if you go to the gym and you walk around the gym, you'll do fine, right? But certainly if you go to the gym and you watch other people doing the stuff, you'll do great. And certainly if you go to the gym and you try, unless you're lifting exceptionally heavy weight, and there's a parallel here, right? Attaching agents to your bank account without knowing how the agents work could have some really dire consequences. But on the whole, you are benefited by being in the arena. This is just true in almost every facet of life. And very rarely is anyone qualified to get into the arena. Right? There is no golden ticket that says you can now use AI. You just need to pick it up. And the cool thing about these tools is they are fairly self-evident, but they also are really good at teaching you how to use them. So that's the first failure mode. People go, I can't do it. The second failure mode is that people actually are very limited in what they believe the tools should do. And for most founders, the belief often, and this comes, I think, right now from a weird scarcity mindset that sort of plagues a lot of businesses, is the idea of it should cut cost. And a lot of small businesses are doing what large enterprises do, which they say, the purpose of this tool or this tooling is to drive down our costs. And if it's not driving down our costs, then it's not ROI positive. And, I like, one of my crusades is to convince people to pull the Malthusian brainworm out of, there's an entire population that is crippled by this idea that the world is of a certain size, that we can't all have more, better things. This is born from the way the boomers talk about the world, both politics and economics. The way that they built infrastructure, that every pie just needs to be divided. You cannot grow it. And I, till the day I die, I will plead with people to see that the world, in fact, can grow another order of magnitude in sort of lots of different directions. But this idea that small businesses in particular need to cut costs is born from this idea that small businesses are always fighting for existential right to life. And I do think that what the internet proved is that there were lots of small businesses that could expand in lots of different directions, especially through platforms like HubSpot or Shopify that gave small businesses incredible new means of growth. And I am really emboldened right now to remind small businesses that their business can be a lot bigger and a lot more interesting, cover a lot more surface area than they realize if they dare to explore it. So those are the two failure modes.
Love it. And from your experience, you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, the difference between working with large enterprises and startups. What separates companies that successfully operational AI from those that stall after experimentation?
Well, this then I think still probably is in a similar vein, but the one thing that I would tell small businesses is if you are not telling, a lot of businesses fail. First, because they didn't set up infrastructure. So they don't have the right context. They're not pulling the data that needs to be pulled. They picked the wrong tool, right? Oftentimes, it's something upstream. I actually find that pilots fail. There's this idea of try again, that because the cost of failure is so low in AI, I mean, unless you have a catastrophic data breach, apropos, I suppose, the actual reason that pilots fail is people give up on them. And if people give up on them, it means that it was a bad thesis to begin with, or there's misaligned incentive. This is sort of my fundamental belief, which is that one, failure is not at all bad. We should normalize as much as possible failure more. And it's one of the things that makes American entrepreneurship and enterprise so great, which is that we haven't made it taboo the way that most countries and most cultures have. And we should protect that at all costs. That's one of the great spirits of American business and building. But also, small businesses should recognize that if people tell them something cannot work with AI, they are either pushing the boundary really far, which is great, or they are probably actually not going far enough. And they are not trying enough tooling. They're not fixing a context window. They are not, connecting the right sets of tools. And if that's the case, then usually it's a storytelling issue. And this is pedantic, but I ask most CEOs, what stories are you telling the people who are building these things? Are you reminding them that if they do this, it will unlock massive potential in the business? Or are you reminding them if they do this, the shareholders will make more money? Because people will fight very hard to expand access to their goods and services. They give up pretty quickly if it means that shareholders get slightly higher dividends. That's just not something that motivates most middle managers.
Yeah. Oh, that's the competing priorities of different size of organizations, right? So you led go-to-market at OpenAI during the launch of ChatGPT 3. Perfect timing. What are the biggest lessons founders can apply from that experience that you went through when thinking about product adoption, scaling a new tech, selling a new service?
I have 3 epiphanies from the ChatGPT launch. True epiphanies. The first epiphany, and I'll say them and then I'll go back and explain them in case people want to write them down. The first epiphany is that the discussion around, I stared at the moment and I decided the discussion around AI was about to get pretty stupid and pedantic. I'll come back to that in a second. The second epiphany is that the application layer is king. And the third epiphany is that the future is natural language. Those are my 3 epiphanies. So on the first, when we launched ChatGPT, it became immediately the way in which 99% of humans related to AI. And that was good for OpenAI. That was really good for OpenAI. And that was pretty good for most software. And it was pretty bad for discussion around AI and policy, AI and societal implications, AI and everything else. Why? Well, if you had been standing next to Edison when he built the light bulb, and you would have or when he invented and showed it off, you would have said, "Wow, that's electricity." And he would have said, "Well, that's a light bulb powered by electricity. And electricity is going to power lots of other things." Because for most people, it was actually the first time that they would have seen electricity delivering something, right? This was very early, and electricity hadn't really become part of a grid or meaningfully actually been in a consumer base. And then you might have gone about being like, well, how am I going to use a light bulb? I guess what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to get my own generator, and I'm going to hold a light bulb above my head. And that's how I'm going to walk around at night. And I'm going to get advantage over people at night by carrying my own light bulb. And maybe I'll have to build a contraption that like dangles the light above my head, like those deep sea fish. And maybe I'll win by carrying a smaller generator. I mean, this is how you would have thought about it reasonably. And the obvious problem with this is still how a lot of people are making sense of AI. They're making sense of it as an application, and it's really making the conversation pedantic, because even in the case of agents, they're talking about it as a form of a tool or instead of infrastructure, instead of a thing that is actually going to power grids and sort of power systems. And I think a thing that actually fades to the background, that becomes mostly invisible. The second is that that the application layer is king. So when we launched ChatGPT, November 30th, 2022, it was 7 months after we launched GPT 3.5. So this is a remarkable thing to remember. GPT 3 comes out January 2021. GPT 3.5 comes out May 2022. And it was state of the art. It was better, faster, cheaper. It answered a bunch of questions. It was economically viable in a ton of new ways. The API was way better to use. We were sure this was going to change the trajectory of the business, and it didn't. We got a little bit better on our growth rate. Bigger companies started to show up. Smaller, the application rent seekers started to do a lot better. But by and large, the API didn't really move the needle. And it got so bad by sort of mid 2022 that I was like, wow, I mean, maybe we're just selling this wrong. We hired solution architects. And then we went into a room and we were like, maybe what we need to do is make this dead simple for people to understand. Maybe we need to build our own application, put it on our website so that when you show up, you can see how cool GPT 3.5 is and you can tell your CEO. And that's what we did. And you know where this is going. We came out of the room, ChatGPT, web app. It was a web app for 4 months. I mean, we thought about it as a marketing honeypot to drive attention to the API so that people could see what was possible. And it reminds me all the time that you can build the world's best underlying technology. If you do not build the application that people want to use, it will not work. The best agents are not the ones that are the best at agentic capabilities. They're the ones that are easiest for the average user to make sense of. Making things simple that comport to the way in which people work is critical. And this is a lesson for every entrepreneur, every product manager. And the third is that the future is natural language. I watched my mom use ChatGPT, and this is a woman who used to type full sentences into Google, I mean, for her entire life, and click on every ad, right? Like one by one. Why isn't this the link? And for whom modern technology was just not self-evident. And she got away with it because she lives a charmed life in Santa Barbara and can call a lot of restaurants and walk lots of places and knows everyone. And it would have isolated her as it's isolated 2 billion people on Earth in the digital divide. Most people don't, not most older people do not understand how technology works in a way that actually includes them in society. And watching her use ChatGPT helped me realize that it made more sense to her than any technology she had ever used. She could pick it up, put it down, talk to it, write to it, and that the future was very clearly a world in which machines were self-evident. And those 3 principles were true in 2022, as true as they are today, and will be true for a long time. And remembering these things, I think actually also helps CEOs take something away from ChatGPT, which is otherwise a lightning in the bottle situation. And lots of entrepreneurs are like, well, teach me the ways. And I'm like, nothing about that product launch can be applied to almost any other product launch. You cannot. This isn't, it's like asking Aaron Judge why he's good at baseball. It's like he was. This is a physical freak put in the right place at the right time. But if you can think about the principles in this way, then you can actually glean quite a bit.
Yeah, keeping it simple. I love that. For founders building in crowded markets, and I guess it's more crowded than ever, how can AI be used for not just for efficiency, but for as like a true differentiator in positioning in a customer experience?
I actually don't know that you can differentiate with AI in the way that people want to differentiate with AI. And the same way that I don't think you can differentiate with the internet or electricity much anymore. I think that what you can do is differentiate on other basis: brand, quality of product. If you're selling a physical good or service, the actual customer experience, the language with which you speak to people, the distribution channels. There are a bunch of, I have taken to now, if you mention me on LinkedIn, I don't love social media. It makes me pretty anxious, but we do a thing now where we ask for everyone's address who gives us any love on LinkedIn, and it's now hundreds of people since the book launch, and I send them a signed copy of the book. It's expensive, but it builds community, and it's feasible, whereas it would not have been. Now it's the cost of a book and shipping, whereas it would not have been feasible a year ago or 6 months ago, because the actual process of automating that would have been prohibitive. And so I've taken technology and basically applied it in a really simple way to build, really, really connected community. And everyone can do stuff like this now. It doesn't have to be the cost of a book and shipping. It can be something much less expensive.
Yeah, love that. So there was a question that came in the chat, but they're just agreeing with you. They love it. Many founders are layering AI into existing workflows. So how should they rethink their business models in light of what AI is making possible right now?
Without, again, without knowing exactly what business anyone runs and appreciating that people run lots of different businesses, the question I would always ask is, how could we grow the business with unmetered intelligence? If we're at the beginning of intelligence as a resource, what does that mean for my business, and how can my business grow as a result?
Yeah. What are some of the highest leveraged, underutilized use cases of AI that early to mid stage founders should be using, should be prioritizing in these days?
Definitely. So I sat next to a congressman, a many-term congressman, a famous congressman, and a pretty big founder 2 days ago on a plane. And we were talking about, we happened to be in the lounge prior to, and we were talking about the most universal, exciting applications of AI. And I think this is basically true for anyone who manages lots of constituents, which is actually understanding what people think about your business. For a long time, sentiment analysis, there's a reason that when we first started building statistical models that could afford to do this, sentiment analysis was the most sought after application. People are, especially consumer businesses, but enterprise too, are desperate to know what people think. And asking people what they think is really hard. It is really hard to ask people, what do you think about this thing? And get like consistent and clear polling back. But what you can do is now collect all the information that already exists about your business, about the market, and do really thoughtful market analysis. And for many small businesses, this is an incredible way to know what all of your biggest competitors are taking advantage of, which is just like the massive amounts of data discussed about your product, your service, your industry, which exist in all corners of the internet. The other is, I do think that, and this is how I use it as a founder, is infinite modeling. people use it as a thought partner, and that's interesting. But I've started to ask it to run like incredible analysis, like basically pretend you're infinitely modeling this, run a regression analysis, and tell me, if you play the scenario out 1,000 times, the most likely outcomes, and you get super fascinating results that are pretty comparable to that which a management consulting firm might do after months or years of analysis. And I've just started to make a lot more sense of things that I had previously just had to sort of, finger in the air. And without specifically talking to any one business, thought partnership is cool. Strategic modeling, like that's amazing. And if you let an agent run for a couple hours or overnight, it will come back to you with really thoughtful analysis on like pretty key decisions that you need to make.
That's awesome. Yeah, prompt engineering, right? It's no longer the Google sentence. Um, so you talked about optimizing for humanistic qualities. And as AI becomes more embedded in businesses, how can founders ensure that they're strengthening, not eroding trust with customers and teams, keeping it human?
So the chapter in the book, the last chapter in the book that I'm actually most proud of, in part because it's really just a letter to my daughter about how I think she should live. The principles are: go outside, be human, learn how to learn, and lead with optimism. And I wrote Be Human after, so when we were preparing the book, we studied a bunch of services roles that had changed as a result of the internet. And the two that became like the most prominent, we studied real estate, brokerage, and wealth management. And in 1995, the average American, let me say it differently. In 1995, 90% of Americans believed that their real estate agent or wealth manager would get them alpha in the market. So they would get them a better price in the home, or they would make them more money relative to their neighbors. By 2010, about 50% of Americans believed that their real estate agent or their wealth manager could make them more money, or alpha. And by 2025, about 15% of Americans believed that their real estate agent or their wealth manager would make them more money relative to another real estate agent or wealth manager. And so there was this collective understanding that the internet prominently, but other factors, had driven alpha out of these two markets where there was just way more information available. Moreover, about 8% of people admitted that their real estate agent or a wealth manager may in fact be financially worse than others, but they liked them anyways. So we now recognize a world where alpha, which should have been the measure of success in these two businesses any time prior, no longer was. And what had replaced it was trust. And trust in the form of real estate agent and wealth manager looks a little different. In the form of a real estate agent, it's, do you actually believe that this person can help you find the home that best serves you and your family? And the second criteria is, do you like spending Saturday and Sunday with them? And in the form of wealth management, it's, do you believe that this person has the best interest of your family at heart, and do they pick up the phone? Right? Number one reason wealth managers get fired is they are not accessible. And so I prepared to write this section on the idea that these critical services roles were moving from how do you make someone a bunch of money to how do you actually make someone feel good? And that alone was good argument. But then this thing happened in my life that totally changed my life. And for some context, I picked the book, I started writing and rewriting the book multiple times in the journey, and basically almost quit it twice. And the second time I almost quit it, or I did quit it, I had literally sort of thrown the physical copies in the trash. I had put the proverbial copies in an archive in Google Drive. And I was like, I just don't have the conviction that I need to say these things because I think they're going to be unpopular. especially against a backdrop of job loss. And then my father, who was an oncologist, received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Breast Cancer Association of America. And this is a man who has spent the last 40 years practicing medical oncology, and his specialty, breast cancer, has gone through a massive transformation, and he's been sort of at the forefront of it on a care and research basis. During his time practicing, the survival rate for breast cancer has gone from about 35% to about 90%. And that alone is a reminder and a testament that technology serves humans, and that the story of technology is actually the story of human progress. And I, growing up, had seen my father as brilliant. It was actually pretty critical to my identity. I saw him as this brilliant man, and I was very excited to tell people how smart he was. He was a lawyer before he was a doctor. He ran a congressional office. He spoke 7 languages. And I told everyone who would listen that my dad was really smart. And I went to this award ceremony, having just thrown the book away, very excited to celebrate my dad, and critically really excited to hear people talk about how brilliant he was. And I sat in this gala, this ballroom, and listened as people came on stage. And just before he received his award, a patient of his came on stage, and she spoke for 5 minutes. For the first 30 seconds, she talked about patient outcome. She had survived breast cancer, was now giving back to the community. And for the next 4.5 minutes, she talked about how my dad made her feel. She described getting a cancer diagnosis and going to see 3 oncologists and getting the same 3 prognoses and the same 3 treatment recommendations. And then she said 2 things that I will never forget. First, she said after the 3rd identical medical prognosis, she realized that the doctor was no longer the smartest thing in the room, that the machine and the technology had progressed far enough that the algorithm was now spitting out the next best practice. And then she said, therefore, the bedside manner is no longer a feature, it's the product. And that genuinely changed my life, because in that moment, I realized that my dad, in fact, was not important to the community because he was brilliant. He was important to the community because he was courageous and compassionate. And that actually the same qualities that the community loved in him, so too did I. What made him special as a father was not how smart he was, it was how much he cared and how courageous he was. And then I realized, almost in that exact moment, that if medical oncology, which is a profession we have long exalted as one of the most cognitively complex, could commoditize, such that the doctor wasn't actually delivering the patient's treatment plan, what role would not move that way? And that at some point in the future, and I don't know when, but much sooner than we realize, what role would not actually be reduced to how we make each other feel? And my dad stood up in that room and admitted to the entire audience that he was intellectually, what he said is, I'm past my intellectual sell-by date. And he said, I've also never been a better doctor because I can finally care for the entire soul and spirit of every patient who comes through my doors. And there's a Lifetime Achievement Award now presented to a Santa Barbara County doctor called the Fred Kass Caring with Compassion Award. And that actually gave me the conviction and to finish the book and to tell people about a future in which I believe humans will be required to be more human, not less. We are so worried that technology, and in this case AI, is actually is dehumanizing us. And I don't know that we've spent enough time to stop and consider if in fact we're totally wrong, and that maybe some of our anxiety is born from the fact that we won't be able to compete on the basis of brilliance alone, that we will be required to return to something much more human. And I'm pretty inspired by that. I am pretty excited about this idea that we will build systems that reward, we will build infrastructure that reward people who treat people best, because there may not be much else to be except the funniest or the most courageous or the wisest or the most thoughtful, the most moral. I mean, the basis that we have long sort of abdicated responsibility in favor of other things, we may actually finally return to.
I love that. And yeah, the digital transformation has kept us so near our screens, but I love that in your note to your daughter, you said get outside too. Keep it human
Well,
and go outside.
so something else. Yeah, I wrote the book from a very personal place because I was like, I kind of live my values. My wife is a Waldorf teacher. And for those of you who don't, Waldorf is an alternative education, much like Montessori. Waldorf, Rudolf Steiner, who built Waldorf 150 years ago, basically believed in, again, raising the whole child, the whole human, and believed that the academic measures of success were way less important than the humanistic measures of success, and that children should be challenged at a young age, that they should be inspired in community, and critically, that technology should be very simple because and he saw the future that the tools would get so complex that we would become fixated on teaching kids tools, which we did, the industrialization of education, and forget the importance of teaching the child how to be a human. He was very prescient, but he was too early. We had to industrialize education so we could get to this point. And I believe now more than ever that we will actually return to alternative education. I believe that we will redesign education around the whole human because we finally have the tools to automate so much else, and that there will be a renewed importance of raising a citizen, a citizen of the world, an explorer, a caring, compassionate human. And that the best way to do this, and Rudolph believed this, is to send the kid outside. Time with friends and family and physical community, places of worship, dining room tables, doing game theory, problem solving, and life skills, it turns out is the most important work that Waldorf does. And I think the most important work that early childhood development will do. And I will die on this hill. I mean, I will, as best I can, crusade that if we rebuilt early childhood education to inspire community, and outdoor community, we would very quickly rebuild a lot of fabric of culture and society.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Problem solving, all of the things. So as all of this automation that we've been talking about increases, what skills or capabilities will become more valuable for founders and their teams to invest in?
Well, I'm at the risk of repeating myself. I think it's pretty, I don't want to say much more, but I do think, like when young people ask me, what should I get good at? I tell every young person, learn how to learn. It, Learn the muscle memory and the motor function required to actually learn something so that you can learn more things. And learning is actually a unique skill that requires practice. It requires humility. It requires curiosity and all these other qualities. But I think there's that. I also, this is true for founders and employees, figuring out this is a quality and a skill and an experience, decoupling your purpose from your job title and your job itself, such that you can find satisfaction in creation, whatever that creation takes, whatever form that creation takes. I have watched accountants and lawyers whose job satisfaction is at an all-time low, who en masse hate what a lot of their work has become, tell me that they never want to be automated out of their job. And this is a very old tale, right? I mean, we've watched as entire industries have fought to protect jobs that are quite dangerous or quite terrible in pay, et cetera, et cetera. And I am really inspired when I meet people who are very willing to say, I don't know what's going to come next, but I'm really excited to create more and build a better world. And inspiring that belief in people is pretty important. Now, I should also say, if the world doesn't get a lot less expensive, and if we don't invent a lot more new drugs, and if we don't discover a lot more about our unknown universe, people are going to be pissed off. You cannot take and not give. And the promise of AI is that it should deflate the cost of goods and services, which, by the way, is not a technological failure. It's a policy one. We don't have expensive housing because it must be expensive. We have expensive housing because of a Malthusian brainworm, and we stopped building it, and we stopped, and we let people gobble it up. But also, we've got to deflate the cost of living, and we've got to invent new drugs. If we do those two things, a lot of people are going to go, yeah, My job changed a lot, and I can't really tell you the track I'm on professionally, but my mom no longer has Alzheimer's. So that's okay. These are Faustian bargains people will make. But if you don't actually give, taking is just it's going to be untenable.
Mm, yeah. Also in the book, you talk about adapted anchor. So can you talk a little bit about agility with AI adoption while remaining grounded?
So someone wrote, "We've lost our sense of curiosity," and I just want to comment on this while I can. I think we have to. I'm desperate to encourage people to not make blanket statements. The internet is filled with blanket statements where someone says everyone or we, this sort of collective fatalism, nihilism, apathy, and if clearly everyone on this call has not lost their sense of curiosity. And if you go into the world as I do on a daily basis and you talk to people from around the world, lots of walks of life, there is a ton of desire to make things better and to learn. And in fact, we make things better all the time. What is really hard for me right now is that people are so fixated on everything that's breaking and not enough on the things that are working. And this is just, I just need to say this before I get off, before I forget. The fixation on all the things that are broken is born from a confirmation bias and a negativity bias, but it doesn't serve us anymore. It served us when we were running away from woolly mammoth and we really needed to worry about what was outside the cave. Life has gotten pretty good now, and we can't celebrate it because we're just too busy telling ourselves all the ways in which our neighbors are terrible. But in fact, they're not. This is the truth. And if you want proof of this, spend time in the world that you can see and fixate on the problems you can solve. This is the best advice I can give anyone, especially young people. Young people are obsessed with the problems they cannot solve and don't care at all about the ones they can. Right? Their friends at school get bullied, nothing to do. Their friends, the people cheat at school, can't do anything about it. Their community is stopped investing in theater or classes that they really want to take. Oh well. But they're willing to stage a school walkout for a problem 10,000 miles away that they know nothing about. And this is performative. This is performative. It's fatalism. And what I tell young people is, if you want to make the world better, fix the thing you can see, because you can do a lot. If every high school walked out for better housing policy, for tax abatements for local retail, for protected bike lanes and sidewalks, for investments in parks, we would rebuild American infrastructure from the inside out. We would unelect local politicians, and we would elect ones that really wanted to make a change. The federal government is mired. And honestly, maybe that's best. Maybe it's best they can do very little, because we can do a lot from the inside out. But talking about how much everything's broken gets nothing done. And actually, what it does is it gives everyone this collective belief that it's okay. This is just where we've gotten. Sorry, I needed to go on that rant.
Agility is a powerful message. I love it.
Agility is important. It's true, Angela. Life is not good for everyone. And also, on average, life has never been better for everyone. This is the hill on which I will die. If I asked you, Angela, when would you rather be born? What day in history? You can't pick one besides this one. On average, it is definitely true that we have a ton of problems. And I'm not asking people to avoid the problems. I'm asking people to point at the solutions. And by the way, my fundamental belief is not anything other than moral, that optimism is actually a moral obligation. If you have children, you have a moral obligation to tell them the ways in which you are fighting to make their world better. And it is not by describing all the problems that they face, it is actually by describing all the solutions you are working towards. This is why so many children, we gave kids the device, which we never should have done. We never should have given them the smartphone, and we never should have given them social media. We compounded our problems because they got lost in their phone. They stared at the horrors of the world on the screen all day. And then they went out into the world believing that the world was broken. It's not. It has problems, but they couldn't have been born at a better time. And they just know too much. It is the cost of unmetered knowledge. We told them everything, unmetered information. Here are all the problems. Why are you not happy? Why don't you want to go play with your friends? Well, you're addicted to a device, and also you just simply know that you think that everything is broken. And this fatalism, this nihilism, is crippling the young population. I mean, they are so fixated on all the problems that the world faces without any of the perspective for all the solutions that have been invented before them. Right? We talk about, I get people talking to me all the time about why do we slaughter so many animals? Well, the reason that India slaughters 8 billion animals a day is so that they can feed their population, which used to starve to death. India achieved food security 10 years ago. We don't celebrate it, but they did it. China achieved food security 30 years ago. We're graduating problems. We used to have way worse problems. And if you knew everything that was going on 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, how would you have even gotten out of bed? And I say all this because we have a chance. The solutions to the problems we face are imminent, more so than ever before. But we only get there by describing. We do not get there by describing the problems.
Some powerful stuff. We do have to get to some Q&A, but Zach, this has been a great conversation. But I guess to wrap, before we jump into Q&A, looking ahead, what should founders be doing now to ensure they're not just reacting to AI, but positioning themselves to lead in the next phase of this technological shift?
Okay, so you asked this feeds to the question you asked earlier, Colin, that I'll answer, which is founders should right now, as best as possible, anchor to their mission, vision, and values. If you run a company, if you run your home, if you run a community, if you are a sovereign individual, anchor to what it is you believe in, what it is drives you, and the point in the distance you want to move to, and be as unwavering in that as possible. It is very easy right now to say the thing that appeals to the people around you, and it's very easy to keep saying a new thing that appeals to people. There's plenty of jargon to make you sound smart. There's plenty of jargon to make you to impress your colleagues. Say the thing that is not always easy to be heard about what you believe. That's part of the reason that no matter how big or small the audience is, there are some crusades I will always go on. And no matter how unpopular these things might be to hear. And be very amenable to how you accomplish it. Right. So be really clear on your mission, vision, values, and be really open to your what I call ways and means. How you accomplish what it is you want to accomplish will change as the technology improves. If you're fixated on the point you want to get to in the distance, you'll be really open to all the tools, all the technologies, all the ways in which stuff changes. And especially if you become really fixated on that mission, vision, values, everything else will sort of guide you. But if you're wavering in what it is, your castle on the hill, then the tools will only confuse you.
Awesome. We're going to jump into Q&A. So if you haven't asked Zach a question yet, drop it into the Q&A box. But Zach, we're just going to keep rolling. And this question is right, building off what you were just talking about. What's the best way you find teams can build strong bonds away from AI? So talking about that human component you were talking about. So while you're advocating for tech, also advocating from time away from tech.
Well, so I usually start all of these events. I admit it's really hard on virtual, and we're not requiring anyone's faces here, and so it's just tough. Every time I get on stage, I start every talk, whether it's to 7,000 people or 20 people, and we do it in our own home. We ask people to put their phones away. We have a basket for phones, and I ask people, I'm like, if you're going to be here, be here. You don't have to be here, by the way. If I bore you, you can get up and leave. And I get the privilege of doing that because I have a microphone. But CEOs also get the privilege of doing that in certain contexts. The invitation to an individual to step away from the device that is rotting their brain in some cases, but certainly trapping them, is an invitation to help people remember that they don't actually hate technology. We describe technology as this pejorative these days, in part because we don't trust big tech. We can talk about that, but not because we hate antibiotics, and not because we hate planes, trains, and automobiles, and not because we hate all of the trappings of modern life that are presented by electricity and the internet. It's because we really hate our relationship with the screen. It's because we really do not like how much the screen begs of us, demands of us. And we have built this relationship, especially in the developed world, with the device that actually presents as a status symbol. And my very hot take is it will be a negative status symbol pretty soon. That being a button pusher or a screen starer, whatever I use these sort of fake pejorative terms, will actually be seen as something that lesser thans do, either because you couldn't get an agent to build it, or you don't have family and friends that love you enough to help pull you away from it. And I believe that the opportunity in any team building activity, in any really deliberate environment, is to demand of people, or request of people, the attention that those situations deserve. They are expensive opportunities to gather everyone. Do it in physical community as much as possible, and make people put their devices away. It really does change in that moment the number of new things that can happen.
I love that. Let's see. One last one before we get to your key takeaway, Zach. You said small business have the advantage of agility and blank. They missed the second thing. That was like in the beginning of the
Small agility and ownership. Yeah, I mean,
ownership.
the two competitive advantages that every small business has over every large enterprise is they can move really fast, and they are true owners, right? I mean, if you run an actual small business, or you work at a small business, you're effectively part of the ownership group. And I do think that small businesses should figure out how to provide equity as much as they can. It doesn't have to be meaningful, but I think we've normalized public companies providing equity and startup private companies with hyper growth. I think creating an opportunity for your small business employees to feel connected to the success of the business is a really easy way to drive the change that you want to see.
I love that. Well, Zach, we could speak for hours, and this has been such a lovely conversation. Everyone, check out Zach's Substack, check out the book. All of this and more are in those. But Zach, if somebody was going to dial into the last 2 minutes of this conversation, what's one thing you want them to take away today?
I think I've said enough. I don't want to dilute my I don't want to dilute my message too much, but I do think that there is a mindset. I will say this. I have spoken on public stages, or on stages, to about 300,000 people over the last 3 years. And I've had success in my career without really investing much in social media. There is a groundswell coming. I am witness to a movement. It's going to happen quietly, and it's going to happen slowly, and then it's going to happen suddenly. But the bit is going to flip soon on fatalism and cynicism, as born from political populism or whatever else is going on all sides of the aisle. And we are going to start demanding of each other and our politicians vision, optimism, and hope. We've been here before. We will be here again. And I think it's going to come in a pretty powerful way. When people wake up and realize they actually have a lot of stuff, they actually have a lot more. And if our great-grandparents saw the opportunities we had today, they would weep with joy. And what we need is a spiritual awakening. What we need is to redefine what it actually means to be a happy, connected human. And we need to fight hard for it as a point in the distance, not as a thing that we're going to achieve tomorrow, but as a thing that we're going to fight so that our kids have it. And it's coming, and it actually is a mindset. It's not much more than that. Our lot in life is good enough. We now need to recognize that we could build something much better for the future generation if we want to, and that actually is just going to come down to what we believe in.
I'm right there with you, Zach, and I look forward to it. But really appreciate you joining us today, sharing more about your book, about your journey, and man, some of this optimism. Everyone's saying they love this conversation. Thank you. So Zach, really appreciate you.
Thanks for everyone for listening. Thanks for the opportunity, Colin.
I'll appreciate it. And for everyone on, we've got more webinars coming up, so we look forward to seeing you in those. But thanks for joining us today. Check out all the things in our follow-up that we're going to send after this. But appreciate you, Zach, for joining us. Check out the book, y'all, and we look forward to welcoming you all back online soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.